Winning in today's market takes the right moves. Welcome to Elevate Your Business from Elevate Coaching at Guild Mortgage. In this episode, learn from a Guild Mortgage SVP how curiosity and courage can help you embrace change, drive innovation, and lead with confidence. Let's get into it.
So I want to welcome Gemma to our Elevate podcast. We're so excited to have you here today. You and I both have had something in common, and that was about being curious, especially when new things have come along. And you're always looking at those things for our company, watching out for us. But we're always going, okay, how are we going to do this? Instead of typically, well, why do we have to change, right? So where did this curiosity come from, do you think, for yourself?
First of all, Paula, thanks for having me on. I'd say that my curiosity really started young. I'm one of 10 siblings, so I grew up in a big family. I have 13 people in a household. I think my curiosity really started understanding that, people are different, personalities are different. Really had to understand how to read the room and negotiate as a child. And that's really, I think, where my curiosity came from. I was one of those why kids that's always asking why and, always believed that things could be better. And so, I carried that curiosity with me my whole life. I know that curiosity, you and I both have a huge passion for it, has helped me all throughout my career.
What do you think happens when leaders or loan officers stop being curious?
I would say that when people, stop being curious, leaders, they've had great experiences. They probably built a career on, expertise. But when you rely too much on the past, when you rely too much on what's worked before, you start missing signals. You start, missing the things that your customers are telling you, your employees are telling you, maybe the technology that's in the market. You start kind of missing that, right? Because, your experience that is so valuable to, how you got where you are, could actually hinder your growth if you stop being curious. And so, I've always, been someone who ensures that, I'm making sure that I'm curious and my teams are curious, because when you don't, you can also hold back your team because you start squashing ideas and not, taking in the feedback. So keeping curious is something that I think if a leader can stay curious, they're, more humble, more nimble, and more able to be relevant.
We see that a lot with loan officers and coaching, what's worked for the last 5 years, it's hard to make those changes and adjustments. But I think what we're seeing as we continue to see technology and AI is a bigger gap between loan officers, and their production, because some are making shifts and changes and some aren't. So I think the numbers are there. So if anything motivates anyone to change, it's to continue to grow, right?
Yeah. And I think we have I think we've got a lot of those foundational pieces that can help someone, change and be curious. And, Paula, the coaching that you do, the platforms that we have all really helped. But you got to remain curious and be able to say what's not working, what's out there to actually make that shift.
The other thing I really appreciate about your story is, you haven't been in corporate your whole career. You began as a processor in a branch. And so if we went back to that time, what have you taken from that time that you bring into your current position?
Working in a branch, first of all, I'm so grateful that that's where I started my experience, because I really got to see at the ground level, how our work every day impacts our customers, impacts our agents, impacts loan officers, impacts everyone in operations. And so, what I really took from that is really an understanding of the pressures, the complexity, the timelines that people are under. And the deadlines are not, days or months or weeks, they're hours, right? And so, I just never forget that when I'm working on, any kind of enterprise strategy, because, just thinking back to those days, Paula, there's always, in everyone who's ever worked in a branch, there's those customers in the back of your head that you never thought you were going to get through, and you finally got them that home. There's also the transactions that maybe went sideways and you had to deal with that. And so, I just take with me, kind of the empathy for everything that our branches go through every day to make magic happen for their customers and their partners.
Well, what kind of advice would you give your younger self? Like, if you had known what you know today, what advice would have you given yourself when you were in that branch?
Yeah, when I was in that branch, I would say just, generally when I was younger in my career, I felt like I needed to know everything. I felt like I needed to be an expert at everything, and I never was, and no one ever is, right? But I would tell myself to let go. I would tell myself to let go of some of that because, um, you know, as I've grown through my career, the thing that I understand is that the power is with the team. The power is with the right people in the room asking the right questions. And that's really how we get our best work done. And so it's less about you need to know everything and more about you need to know who you need to know and you need to know the questions that you need to ask. And so I would say that, my younger self, I would definitely say, felt like I needed to grip on to a lot of that and, letting go of that and just knowing that, um, you know, being confident that you can, bring your team together to actually, have the best expertise across everyone.
You talked about in your story a little bit in the beginning of having some lack of confidence in your career, which is a lot of people have that. I mean, that's very, it's not rare. I mean, we hear that with top producers all the
Yeah.
time. But one of your mentors and one of the people I love, Barry Horn, what do you think he saw in you before you saw it in yourself?
Well, first of all, if you know Barry, you know what a treasure he is.
Oh, yeah.
Barry's just a transformational leader. I was super lucky to get to spend time with him early on in my career. I was still in my 20s when I started working for Barry. And, he led by example. He was super creative, disciplined in what he did. He cared deeply about the people and the work. And so I took a lot from him. But one of the things I think he saw in me, maybe before I saw it in myself, is just that strategic thinking. I worked hard. I, was, getting stuff done, but, really to one of the skill sets that I've learned that I have over time is that I do have the ability to go deep and understand the details, but I also have the ability to look at the big picture and step back. And I think, Paula, that's one of the things that you and I have in common is that we can really, see how things connect the dots. And he really fostered that in me. He helped me, understand how important that is and how to really foster it.
How do you think that shaped your development today?
Well, I think in terms of shaping my development, he understood how people, and the talents that they have are so valuable and how he encouraged people to grow. And so today, one of the things that I do when I'm kind of leading my team and making sure that I'm growing my team is to focus on building on people's strengths. And really understanding how to leverage and how to lean in and what makes people special is different. And, over time, sometimes when you get into execution mode, you want to, sometimes people want to kind of be with the same type of people as they
Mhm.
are. And there's such a value to building a team that's diverse, to having the driver and the empathizer and the dreamer and the analyst and the executor and all these different people, right? Because that's the skill set that actually brings everyone together and makes it happen. If we were all dreamers, nothing would happen.
Right.
If we were all drivers, we wouldn't have the empathizer and the person to kind of slow us down and say, hey, have you thought about this other thing? And so, I've just taken his approach was always to take the best in people and make it shine. And that's, what I try and do within my team too.
Another thing, you're always, you're at events, you're looking at technology and how are we going to continue to grow and change? That takes courage, right? Because there are a lot of things that, is this the new thing? Is this the right place for us to go? What do you think is that difference between confidence and courage to make some of those changes?
Yeah, there is a lot out there, and it's not always clear what the road ahead is. And so, I think the difference between confidence is, really having a belief in something and knowing that that's going to work out, and courage is kind of the willingness to, start even though you don't know if it's going to work out. And I know for myself personally, I've leaned a lot on courage in my career, and I think a lot of people have. When we didn't really know exactly how it was going to work out, but you knew you had to start. And that's what one of my favorite quotes ever, Zig Ziglar. You don't have to be great to start, but you got to start to be great. And that's something that, I really take with me, kind of that progress over perfection. But courage is I think the thing that comes first. And then, you're going to learn, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to build your skills, and, eventually the confidence is going to come. And, when it comes to technology and knowing what is the next thing, I think we're, constantly iterating on that.
I mean, confidence is what gets you to start, right? You just sometimes have to do it, and you have to have the courage to do it, right? So, AI is everywhere. We talk about it, we're excited about it, but there's some people that have some fear around it. Some people is this going to replace my job? You know, we've heard all of those things. What do you think the future is for AI in our industry? What would you say to our salespeople?
I would say that what excites me about where we're going with AI and technology is that it's really going to help us improve the experience. And when I say that, I don't just mean for the customer or the partner. I mean for our loan officers, for our operations team, for our people here at corporate. You know, Mortgage is super complex. We've got, lots of steps, we've got documents, we've got handoffs. There's a lot of friction in the process. And, I think that we can create transparency and create speed within that. But most importantly, Paula, I think that this is going to help us continue to do what we do best as humans, which is lean into those human skills, lean into judgment, lean into advice and relationship building. And I do not think that, AI is going to replace us. I do think we need to adopt AI and think about how we can leverage it to have even better human connection. And so, I think that there's, obvious reasons why people are fearful because it's unknown. It's unknown, what it is now and, what it's going to be in the future. But I think the curiosity of, what can we make it is so important because it's obviously it's here, genie's out of the bottle, and it's something that I think has a lot of promise to actually allow us to do even better, more important work.
Where do you think people are underestimating AI right now?
You know, I think I don't know that I think people are necessarily underestimating AI. And in my opinion, I think that there is there's a lot that's continuously happening. No one can keep up with all of the things that are being deployed in AI and in all the different places right now. But I think that, in terms of how people engage it, I would just say for someone who maybe is thinking that it's not that powerful, it can't do all of those things, you know, I would say get in there and put your hands on it and be curious about it. But there are going to be things that we need to make sure that we're doing when it comes to AI and how we apply it to our business because um, you know, there's regulation. We live in a very regulated industry, and we all also need to make sure that we're really ensuring that we're deploying it the right way. We're deploying it safely. We're deploying it with our customers and our partners' trust in mind. And so I would say that we're really needing to make sure that we're exploring it and we understand what it is today, and really understanding what we think it's going to be tomorrow, and doing that in a way that actually has some guiding principles around it.
The thing about being really good at talking to people, right? And educating them and guiding them. And this gives us an opportunity because I think when loan officers get into the weeds a lot, that's the excuse of why we can't make phone calls or we're not following up. And if we can take that pain away, we should be better at the other with our follow up and communication with our clients and a better customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the places where AI can do a tremendous job already is by allowing our teams to have more time to do that type of work. by being able to give them answers quicker, by being able to analyze things, by being able to identify what we should be calling out for our borrowers. I think that there is a lot that's already available, and really hopefully is giving loan officers and their teams more capacity to have better conversations. Because I think it starts with the communication. That's one of the most important parts of our transaction, and how we're working with our customers. And if we can have a better understanding of what's going on and what we need to communicate, we have a better opportunity to be able to have that communication and make those relationships.
So the other thing you've done a great deal of, especially over the last 3 years, is leading through change. We've had a lot of acquisitions. We've had a lot of technology changes. Um, what have those experiences taught you about leading people through change?
Well, I'll kind of lean into our acquisitions. So, over the last few years, we brought a lot of companies onto the Guild platform, and we've been so fortunate to partner with amazing people who have come to Guild and partnered with us. And I would just say that working on bringing on a company and working across the entire organization to ensure that that's, a great experience from, the time that we start talking to them to when they're fully onboarded. There's this whole part about projects and plans and timelines and milestones. And that is, part of the work. But the real work is about the people and the change and how they feel. Paula, I've been on the other side of an acquisition. I'm sure you have too, and probably almost every person who's been on this, who's listening to this. And so I have a lot of empathy for that. In terms of, what are they thinking in the back of their head? They're thinking, will I be successful? Will I be supported? How is this going to work? And so I would say, one of the things that I wouldn't say taught me, but reinforced is, the importance of our culture of listening. We have a culture of listening here at Guild, and, through every one of, the companies that have come on board, we've spent a lot of time listening, a lot of time learning. How do they do things? And how do we jointly want to do things? Because, sometimes what they're doing is what's better than what we were doing. And, I think it's that collaboration that really created, the success that we had across all of our teams. But it's about, change is about, communication. It's about care. It's about building trust, doing what you say you're going to do, building relationships. And, it definitely reinforced that for me that, checking the box is an important thing for us to do on all the things that need to be done because we need to take care of our people. But the relationship piece is front and center every time.
What do you think, so like as people are coming on and you've dealt with a lot of people, whether it's their teams or loan officers, and so there's a lot of change going on. Why do you think people resist change? And you and I dealt with this when we were trying to get adoption of Salesforce, right? So what is it that stops people from wanting to change?
Yeah, we're fortunate, Paula, that we get to work on these opportunities together. I'll just smile and say that. But, I really think people will embrace change when they understand why, when they trust the intent, and when they feel included in the change. And so I think when people resist, it's really when they're uncertain, when they don't really understand the why behind it, and when they don't feel like it really fits with what they're trying to do. And so I think as leaders, it's always our job to communicate the why. It's always our job to make sure that we're showing the early success and, getting people and feedback to really help us refine it. So, when we launched Salesforce, many moons ago, we had a lot of feedback just to get it to the place where we did. And then we had a tremendous amount of feedback to develop what I think is one of the top, sales processes in our industry. And so, I think change and leading through change really is about, building confidence with the people that you're, leading through change. And when they feel confident that they can make the change, I think that they will. some people are resistant. There is all sorts of, the curve of change and how people feel comfortable. But I think at the end of the day, when, people feel that, they're supported, that they understand the why, that, you're giving them, honest feedback on it, and you're able to take honest feedback, that's when you're going to be able to be successful with a change.
I've always said, okay, guys, what's in it for them, to get them to try to come in and look at it. And it's been interesting as years have gone on where people have, they went into it in the beginning, they didn't see the value, so they didn't come back in. And then years later, as we've built it and grown it based on the loan officer, then they come back around and go, gosh, I wish I would have got into this earlier than now. So I think the biggest lesson with technology is it's always evolving, it's always changing. So if it's not there at the moment, we always have to continue to go back because it continues to get better and typically easier for the user.
And I think that's something, Paula, that you've championed, and just your curiosity to continue to go back in and continue to just, be curious about what's new in there, and is it working the way that, you want it to work. I think that those are, exactly the things that, those who have really dove in have been the ones to, really, be curious first. And, you and, many others are the example that a lot of others can follow. So thanks for blazing the trail, because, you and others have really helped the rest of the field see and connect the dots between, an idea to the reality that it is today.
Teamwork, right?
Teamwork, dream work.
One of the answers I loved when we sent you the questionnaire was about your focus on purpose, consistency, and energy. So, how have you stayed connected to your purpose, through as the business has continued to change, or has gotten difficult at different times in your career?
It kind of comes down to two things for me. It comes down to service, and it comes down to impact. And, everyone wants to do work that feels like it matters. There's not a certain person, anyone that I know that doesn't. And so when I think about my purpose, I think about, am I serving people and am I making a meaningful impact? And so when things get difficult, which can happen, um, you know, I look to those two things and I ask myself those questions. Am I making it, am I serving people, and am I making a meaningful impact? And hopefully 9 times out of 10, I can say yes to those things. And if I do, that really grounds me back into what I'm doing, and you could try and, make your purpose a huge complex thing. I've really simplified it for myself because, I can easily see that, I can see the forest through the trees and say, am I doing those two things? And it really helps to ground me when, things feel tough. And as a leader, you have an extra responsibility, as well. And so, just really making sure that serving your people and, making an impact, also includes how your team, is coming together. And so it grounds me every day. I definitely think about my purpose every single day, as I'm, getting going, because it helps me, through long days and through, challenging, either scenarios or conversations.
Well, I know you have very long days because we talk sometimes in the morning and then later in
And
the
then later at
evening
night.
and then later in the night and even on the weekend. I
Yeah.
have to tell you a little story about Gemma. I was getting a pedicure and I couldn't get into my Salesforce app. So I was like, and I had to call this client back and I didn't have the number. I literally called Gemma because I knew she had the app. She opened up the app and sent me the phone number. I mean, that is someone who understands the technology, who's dependable, and always picks. You should be in sales, Jenna.
I'll take your call all the time, Paula. And, I'm here to serve. So, whatever you need.
So to avoid burnout, because it can, easily we can go there. What are you doing for yourself to help yourself not avoid that burnout? Because you have a lot of things going on.
One thing that I shifted, and I would say it's probably been 2 or 3 years, is, For years I used to get up in the morning and I jump right on the emails and check things and the news and what's happening and, just kind of get into it. And then I get ready for the day and then I go to work. What I've really shifted to is protecting my mornings, is protecting my mental state right in the morning. And so, now I spend a little time doing some meditation, some intention, some gratitude and reflection. And, that has made a huge difference for me because when I can start my day that way, when I can start my day intentional, it just sets the stage for me to, be intentional throughout scenarios and not be reactive. And, it protects basically the beginning of my day so that I can really show up the best version of myself for the rest of the day. And, sometimes that intention wears off a little late in the day, but, it's really something that has helped me just take the time for myself to make sure that I'm grounded and I'm understanding what I want to accomplish and show up as before I, interact with anyone in my household, any technical device. And that helps me, avoid a little bit of that burnout because I've got my energy set right from the beginning of the day.
And you're in our goal. We are still trying to figure out how we can play a little golf on Friday afternoon. We're not there
Absolutely.
yet. We're not
Yeah.
there yet.
And we're going to do it together, even though we
Yeah.
don't live in the same city, but we'll figure it out,
We'll
Paula.
figure it out. I
Yeah.
mean, even if it's once a month, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So the other thing we talked about is your shift, right? From like kind of being in the busy work to being able to scale, right? To scale and build a system. What separates leaders who scale from, who stay stuck in the operational side, but then rise above that and be able to have vision and to be able to lead in that direction?
When you're early on in your career, you're doing a lot of individual contributor work. And you do have to shift to be able to really leverage your team. And in order to do that, you need clarity. You need to know what you're doing so that you can communicate it with everyone and everyone's on the same page. You need focus and accountability, and you need systems. And so, I think that it's shifting from how do I operate as an individual to how do I operate as a leader? And sometimes every leader gets stuck in the weeds and can become the bottleneck for their team. And so I think scale really becomes when you can build something that is going to perform beyond your individual capacity and is going to perform whether you're there or not. And so I think the measurement sometimes that I think of is, if you can go on vacation and no one talks to you and all of the stuff gets done, you're building something that scales because people are aligned. They know what they need to do. They know how to execute on things. But I do think it comes down to really creating, clarity and focus and creating systems for people so that, you can help scale. And then I would say the other thing, Paula, is that we need to have the priority right. There's so many good ideas, and especially now, there's no shortage of ideas ever again. And so, helping the teams figure out what's most important, and making sure we're putting our energy towards that, is really something that's going to help scale. Because if you scatter your energy across 150 different initiatives that sound cool, you're not going to get there. And so that focus is really part of creating scale.
What's one leadership lesson you're still learning, you're still working on?
Probably a little bit of what I just talked about in terms of making sure that I'm giving my team the ability to, fully take things forward. So I do a lot of delegation, but there's still things that I hold tight. And so, one of the things is continuing to grow other leaders so that they can take more. So I'm still working on that. I think, Paula, you and I talked about it. It's like when you build a team, you're, continuously kind of shifting what responsibilities, people have. And I would say that that's something that it's kind of never done. in a way, because you're always, as you take on more, you're kind of understanding what that is before you can pass it down to your team in some respects. And so that's something that I'm, in the midst of constantly doing is, um, taking that work and then figuring out how to kind of bring it to the team and have the team kind of take a lot of that.
Yeah, I think what I've learned is it's really about empowering people around us. When I was coaching college basketball, and I was also working at my uncle's restaurant, I accidentally learned this lesson way back then because it was out of selfishness. I wanted to coach, but I had these three gals working with me, and I had these duties that had to be done, whether it was going to the
Hmm.
bank or
Yep.
prepping or whatever. And so I asked them to asked them if they wanted to do those things, right? What I didn't understand until later was by empowering them to take on those responsibilities, they stayed with me for 3 years. They were loyal, right? Because in my mind, I was young and being selfish, like I just needed someone to do these things for me. But what I realized is that empowerment is what kept them with me, all those
Yeah.
years because they knew
Because
I
they
had
grew.
confidence. Yeah, they
Yeah.
grew, right?
Yeah.
So that's something we're always trying to work on is empowering people.
Yep.
What excites you about the future?
I would say what excites me about the future is that there is just a lot of opportunity out there. When you think about AI and some of the stuff that we talked about, um, there's so much that we can do in terms of the technology and really making a huge impact for our teams and for our customers and our partners. And I just think, Paula, that we've got a lot of endless, innovation and things that we can lean into. Um, and the other thing I would say is that I feel like here at Guild, we've got the right team working on it together. Between the field leadership, between the teams here at corporate, I feel like together we're really on the same page to drive things forward. And so, what excites me is that I think we just have a huge opportunity to continue to, serve our loan officers, bring more loan officers onto Guild to, help them continue to grow their business. We've got a huge opportunity to continue to help our customers, understand from the very beginning of when they have, an inkling that they want to, start to think about buying a home, all the way to, their homeowner, and we're servicing their loan and we're looking for that next opportunity for them. Um, you know, we have the ecosystem for all of that. And so now it's about how do we continue to optimize, how do we continue to leverage, and I think that there's just so much power in the collective of what we've developed, and so there's a lot of opportunity for us to really keep making an impact together.
Throughout our conversation, we've talked about the curiosity, we've talked about courage and leadership, AI, innovation. But the one statement in your questionnaire that sticks with me is I don't need to prove myself. I need to improve myself. And so, what does that mean to you today? And to our listeners, what does that mean?
I would say that it means growth is more important than validation. I early in my career, and I think for most people in some point of their life, they felt like they had to prove themselves. To get to the next place, to be able to advance. And naturally, we all, have some of that belief, I think, inside of us. And I shifted. I would say, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, to really thinking about it not as proving myself, but as how do I improve myself? How do I build my skill, so that I can be ready to take on the next thing? So how do I continue to learn about new things? How do I take care of my health better? What challenges am I trying to take on next? And so it really became a mindset for me, because just think about it, Paula, when you're trying to prove yourself, you're doing different things, right? You're making sure people see you. You're obviously taking on the challenges, but you're also, looking for a bit of that validation. when you focus on growth and when you focus on improving yourself, you're focusing on improving your personal self and leading yourself, self-leadership. You're also focused on improving the process and the team, the people around you, knowing that that's going to lead to, probably more opportunities than if you were focused on just kind of where am I going next. And so that's really been a mindset shift for me in the last, 5 or so years. And it's helped me really stay focused on the impact and less on, politics or anything else.
Totally get that. So we're about to end this episode. And what is one challenge from you want our listeners to take from this episode?
Stay curious, keep improving, keep trying to make an impact, ask yourself, where am I too comfortable that maybe I need to grow? Where am I proving myself? Where maybe I just need to focus on improving myself? Am I caring too much? Do I need to build systems? Do I need to rely on my team more? Can I empower my team to your point, Paula? Because there is a lot of change that I think we're going to continue to see. This is an industry that's always seen change. So that's not new, right? But I think we're going to continue to see more. And so I would just say, don't let that change make you defensive or make you fearful. Let it make you curious about what is possible. And I think if you stay curious and you stay grounded in your purpose, you're going to continue to grow and, be able to make an impact for the people around you.
I want to thank you for being here today. I always love talking to you. I think for everybody that's listening, you've heard it 100 times on this episode, is we need to stay curious, right? We need to keep learning and we need to keep evolving because things are going to continuously change. So again, Gemma, thank you so much for being on our podcast. And I hope everybody that listened was able to get some leadership advice from one of our greatest leaders here at our company. Thank you, Gemma.
Thanks, Paula.
Thanks for listening to Elevate Your Business, a podcast from Elevate, the internal coaching program at Guild Mortgage. Glad you could be here for today's playbook. If you want to check us out, head over to guildmortgage.com and click About Us to find Elevate Coaching. Have a question or want to keep the play going? Visit us and send a DM on Instagram at Elevate Mortgage Coaching, or leave a comment for us on YouTube. We're posting extra content, behind-the-scenes action, and everything you need to stay in the mortgage game. On Elevate Your Business, we share real stories and strategies from top producers to help you move forward. So ask yourself, what are you waiting for? It's time to elevate.
Guild Mortgage Company, Equal Housing Opportunity, Arizona Broker License Number 0018883, licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Massachusetts Mortgage Lender License Number MC3274. Massachusetts Mortgage Broker License Number MC3274, licensed by the Mississippi Department of Banking and Consumer Finance, licensed by the New Jersey Department of Banking and Insurance. Nevada Mortgage Company Number 1141, Oregon Mortgage Lender License Number 176, Rhode Island Licensed Lender, Rhode Island Licensed Third-Party Loan Servicer, Company NMLSID 3274. For licensing information, go to www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org. All loans subject to underwriter approval. Terms and conditions apply, subject to change without notice. Guild Mortgage Company is an equal opportunity employer. Guild Mortgage Company 5887, Copley Drive, floors 13456, San Diego, California 92111. For more licensing information, please visit www.guildmortgage.com/licensing. Elevate is an internal Guild Mortgage Company coaching program and not a separate entity. Podcast content is provided for informational purposes and based on publicly available materials or tactics used in the industry. The views, strategies, or opinions discussed do not necessarily represent those of Guild Mortgage Company or its affiliates. Intended for mortgage industry professionals only. Paula Nirschl, NMLS number 383396.
Thank you for joining us on Elevate Your Business, a podcast for mortgage professionals brought to you by Elevate, the internal coaching program at Guild Mortgage.